Hi, this is Jerry. Welcome to my channel. I appreciate you taking some time to watch my videos. Hopefully I'm helping to educate you a little bit and answer questions that people may have about solar and maybe help you along the way if you're deciding you want to go solar, or if you're thinking about going solar but you're not sure what to do next. Hopefully these videos will help you a little bit. The biggest thing that I'm trying to do is educate people and kind of put you in the driver's seat. We've all been there where someone's knocked on our door and tried to sell us solar or something. And solar has a very bad reputation of being a very aggressive industry where there's high pressure sales for you to sign immediately and not do your research, things of that nature. So I'm hoping that these videos will help you kind of be that research, or at least give you some of the insight that you might need to help you decide if you want to go solar, how you're going to go, who you're going to pick as an installer, etc. Please, before we continue though, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Help me grow my channel. So the first thing we're going to talk about is solar sellers or dealers and installers. So there are a couple different types of companies that will sell solar. There are some companies that just sell solar. All they do is sell, and then as soon as they finish the sale, they have what they call an EPC to install. An EPC is basically just a third-party contractor that's going to come out and install your system. The actual name I'm going to put up here. There's an actual name for the acronym, but just understand that an EPC is a contractor that's installing for another company. You also have install companies that sell. So they will have they'll be a full service company. They will sell, they will market, they will do everything and install your system. Some companies just install. They don't market, they don't sell. All they do is install for other companies that are selling. Some are hybrid. Some will do their own marketing and selling, and they will also install for other companies. So there's a variety of things that are out there as far as companies and options are concerned. In most cases, that really doesn't concern you, other than picking the best company to do your installs. And I'm going to do another video on things that you can do to make sure that you've done your due diligence when selecting a solar installation company, or when you decide to buy solar. So the first thing I want to talk about is how to decide how big of a system you need. And that's the easy part. The easy part is figuring out how big of a system you need. So the first thing you need to do, if you're deciding you want to go solar and you're kind of deciding what are the next steps that I need to take in order to put solar on my roof, the first thing you need to do and want to do is decide how big of a solar system you need, how many solar panels you need on your house. And the first thing you do is go get 12 months of bills and you add it up. You just figure out how many kilowatt hours you use every year in your house. So for the sake of an example, we're going to assume, let's say a normal house is about 10,000 kilowatt hours a year. And we're going to try to figure out, okay, how big of a system, how many panels am I going to need to produce 10,000 kilowatt hours of electricity a year? The second thing that you need to understand is that when solar companies design systems, they're designing it for a year. They're designing to give you 100% offset or 90% offset or some type of an offset over the course of a year. So some months you're going to overproduce, some months you're going to underproduce. The months that you underproduce, if you have a good net metering agreement with your utility, then you're going to get a credit. And then those credits should roll over to the months that you underproduce and have to use more electricity from the grid. So for the sake of this example, let's say you use 10,000 kilowatt hours a year. The first thing you want to do is it's very simple math. You take 10,000 kilowatt hours and you're going to divide it by the production ratio. So there's a production ratio that's in the United States, and the estimates are between a 1.3 and a 1.6. Depending on where you are in the United States, your production ratio could be 1.3, it could be 1.6. All this is just basically an estimate of what each panel would produce as far as the wattage of the panels and the estimated production of those panels. So the first thing you're going to do is take your 10,000 kilowatt hours and you're going to divide it by 1.4. Then you're going to divide that number by the wattage of the panels. So let's say you've done some research and you want to get 400 watt panels, or you can see that there's some, maybe some cheaper 360 watt panels, whatever. You would just divide that number by the wattage of the panel. So for this sake of argument, we're going to do 10,000 kilowatt hours divided by 1.4 divided by 400. That gives us 7,200 kilowatt hours. That means that you need a system that is 7,200 kilowatts in size, and that should produce over the course of a year about 10,000 kilowatt hours. Now, 7,200 kilowatts is 18 panels. So if you do that 10,000 divided by 1.4 divided by 400, it comes under just under 18, which means that you need just under 18 panels that are 400 watts to produce your electricity. And that gives you your system size at 7.2 kilowatts. I've got the math up here. You can see kind of how to do it, and it's pretty simple. But this way, hey, I need a system that's for 10,000 kilowatt hours a year. I need a system of 18 panels that produce 400 watts. Now, if I can only get 370 watt panels, I'm going to need a few more panels than that. But this just kind of gives you a ballpark figure of what system size would fit on your house, or you would need to put on your house. Now, the other limiting factor on this is your roof. If your roof if your roof doesn't have the space to put panels on it, or that many panels, then you might have to make some adjustments to what you want. Or you might have to go with a little bit higher panel size, wattage size, and it's going to increase your cost a little bit, but it will decrease how many panels you have to put on your roof. Now, the next thing let's talk about is what you can estimate to pay for that system. And this is where it gets kind of murky, because some companies are going to try to charge you, they're going to try to charge you as much as they can. But I've seen companies selling as much as $5 a watt, and I've seen companies selling as high as $3 or as low as $2.90, $2.95 a watt. But let's say for sake of argument that your solar company that you're working with wants to charge you $3.50 a watt. So for a 7.2 kilowatt system, that's going to equal to about $25,200. So they're going to charge you, and what they want to charge you is $25,200 to install your system. Now, this is where it gets murky, and we're going to talk a little bit later about dealer fees. If you pay cash, you should be able to knock that price down a little bit, several $1,000s. You might be able to get to where they could sell it to you for $3 a watt, $3.10 a watt, maybe even under $3 a watt. If you are financing it through one of the major finance companies, you're probably not going to get below that $25,000, and I'll explain that in just a second on why that's more than likely. Now let's look at the cost of your system. What you can expect as far as the cost of the install company, what that cost is going to be to them. But this is just going to kind of give you the numbers on what you can expect to pay as far as individual components. So the first thing, systems are basically broken down into 4 different areas. So you have racking, which is your mounts and your rails. You have panels, you have inverters, and you have what they call balance of system, BOS, balance of system. All of these have different price points. All of these have different costs. And I'm going to go over these with you. But these are just estimates. But it's rough. But these are close. So racking is going to cost anywhere between 11 cents and 15 cents a watt. It might cost more. They might try to charge you more. But that's typically what I found in my 5 years of running solar operations, is about, on the low end, 11 cents a watt. I've seen some where you have like railless systems, and I've got a video on the difference between railless and rail systems. Railless systems tend to be a little bit less expensive because there's less components. You can sometimes get those for 7-8 cents a watt. So there's a potential savings there. But let's just say for the argument that this system that's 7,200 kilowatts in size is going to cost about $1,000.80 for the racking. So that's the mounts, that's the rails, that's all the hardware that's needed to mount the panels to the roof. Now panels, that's always an up and down. In this case, you need 18 panels. Panels are going to be anywhere from 35 cents to 45 cents a watt. So I'm going to estimate that a 400 watt panel is going to be about $3,600 for 18 panels. Again, if the dealer or the company that's selling or the company that's installing is doing their due diligence, they're always looking for panels that are less expensive. Now, let me give a caveat here. Do not ever buy anything that's not tier 1 panels. And if you're paying cash, pay attention, because some companies will try to slip in tier 2 or tier 3 panels because they're less expensive, but they're not as reliable. So if you're paying cash, demand that they put tier 1s and get some type of confirmation that they're putting tier 1 panels on your roof. If you're financing, they will only be allowed to use tier 1 panels. So you don't have any risk there. So we've looked at the racking. It's going to be about 15 cents a watt plus or minus. So that's about 1,080. 18 panels are going to be around $3,600. They could be more, they could be less. But that's just kind of a rough estimate. Your biggest expense is going to be inverters. Inverters can be anywhere from $250 to $300 an inverter if you go with a single inverter per panel. If you do that, you can expect to pay about $4,500 for 18 inverters. Now, there is some potential for cost savings on the installer side if they were to go with a inverter or an inverter that has multiple ports. So there are companies out there like AP Systems or Hoy Miles that have what they call a quad or a dual, which means that you can hook up 2 panels to one inverter or 4 panels to one inverter. This is going to save some cost on the inverters. Those inverters are a little more expensive, but they're not as expensive as, let's say, 4 inverters. They do require a little bit more work to install just because of the way they're designed. And that's something I know that Hoy Miles is actually working on right now to make sure that those the connections are a little bit longer and more efficient and easier to install. But for the sake of this, let's just go with, let's say like an N-phase, a single inverter per panel. You're going to pay about $4,500 for inverters. That leaves BOS, balance of systems. And that's all the electrical. That's your breakers, a combiner panel. It's what they call a J-box, which is a box on the roof that where a bunch of connections are made from the individual panels and the inverters. The electrical wire, all the little components that are required to connect and to make sure your system's working properly. That's about $1,000. Labor is probably the least expensive of these things. Most solar companies usually employ a 4 to 5 man crew. A system of 18 panels, 7,200 kilowatts, might take 6-7 hours to install, maybe less, depending on the experience of the crew. But a system this size would probably cost about $600 in labor. You're going to have about $600 in fees, and this could be up a little bit higher depending on the city. I've seen some utilities or some cities that charge more for their permitting process and their permits. They charge several $100, $300, $400, $500 for a permit for solar. Some might charge $90, $150, something like that. It's all hit and miss. So I'm just guesstimating. Your fees are going to be $600 in this situation as on an average, and that includes the permitting fees. That includes engineering stamps. So most cities, most counties require some type of an engineering verification of the worthiness of the structure of your house, that the trusses will hold and support the weight of the panels. You've got sometimes there's other fees that are involved, connection fees, things like that. You can expect to have about $600, $700 in fees that will be added to the cost of your system. Now comes the murky part, really murky part, like anything else wasn't murky, and that's marketing and commission. And this is going to vary by company. There are estimates out there that I've heard as high as between $2,000 and $3,000 per customer that buys solar. The marketing costs are about $3,000, $2,000 to $3,000 And what that means is it's expensive to market, and those companies that are marketing and generating their own leads are going to be reaching out to multiple people. They're going to be paying for multiple websites. So Facebook, YouTube ads. They might be paying people to go knock doors, and in which case they're knocking 50, 60 doors to get one lead, but they're being paid for all those hours of door knocking. So estimates are that the marketing costs per sale is about $2,000 to $3,000. So I'm just going to kind of split that down the middle and estimate it about $2,500 in marketing fees. It might be higher. I've heard as high as $4,000 in some cases. And then commissions. Commissioning fees vary by company. It could be by watt. It could be by flat rate. There's a variety of reasons that a company would do different types of commission structures to compensate their salespeople. A lot of cases, they have some people that are doing the marketing, they're knocking doors and they're generating leads, and then there's somebody else that's actually closing the sale. So there's generally two costs that are associated. So if you add all these up, the basic cost of your system, of a 7,200 kilowatt system, is going to be about $15,380 roughly. So about $15,300. But they're going to try to sell it to you at $4 or $5 a watt. Again, remember, if they sold it to you for $3.50 a watt, you're paying $25,000 for the system, and it's costing them about $15,000 to install the system, to get the equipment, to pay the people to do the work, things like that. Now, this also doesn't take into account overhead, which is something that has to be taken into account, that those companies are paying for a office space or a warehouse or both. They have designers, they have people that are doing permitting, running paperwork around. They have project managers. They have a lot of overhead, and those costs aren't figured in here. So you can probably figure another $1,000 or $500 or whatever. It all depends on the volume of the company. But just kind of understand, if you're looking at building a 7,200 kilowatt system, you can expect the cost of your components and the labor and the parts of your system to cost the company about $15,000 to $16,000. So I hope that kind of gives you some ideas on how to calculate what your system would cost, and that can help you kind of in the negotiations, because if you know your system should cost about $15,000 to build, but they're trying to charge you $25,000, well, there's $10,000 in there in profit for them. So you might just say, hey, let's get it down to $20,000 or $19,000, and you're always in a position to negotiate with the company, or go shop the company, go shop multiple installers and get the best deal that you can. But hopefully this gives you some insight into what you can do to prepare yourselves in negotiating with the installation company or a company that sells solar to get the best deal for yourself and for your family. Okay, now let's talk dealer fees. And this is the kind of the evil part of solar. And it's a necessary part. Without these companies being willing to finance, solar would not be where it's at today. And it's getting cheaper and less expensive all the time. But unfortunately, dealer fees are kind of a necessary evil in this market, in solar sales. What are dealer fees? Well, those are the fees that a lending company is charging an installer to borrow the money. And the problem is that you as the homeowner are going to be the one that bears the brunt of that cost of the dealer fees. Now, if you can't afford to put solar on your house, or you don't have equity in your house where you could draw it out and use that money to buy solar, then you're going to end up having to borrow money from one of the big companies that lends for solar, like Good Leap, Service Finance, etc. There's just no choice in the matter. Most banks will not lend money on solar panels. There's just not enough equity in them, and there's not enough value in them if somebody were to default on the loan. So it kind of leaves you in the situation where you have to use the outside financing sources, and they're going to charge you a dealer fee. What you can do is shop around. If your credit's good, you can maybe have them look at different finance companies. And most sellers will actually, when they run your credit and look at the financing side of it, will start with the companies that have the lowest dealer fees, and then go up depending on your credit rating and stuff like that. Well, let's get to the dealer fee. Let's get to the meat of the situation. Most dealers that are lending money for solar are charging between a 24 and 30% dealer fee. So in this situation, if you were to borrow $25,200 to build a 7,200 kilowatt system at $3.50 a watt, your dealer fee is $6,552. That means that they're going to pay the installation company $18,648. Now remember what our price was on our home as far as costs. Costs were $15,380 to install your system, to pay for the equipment, to pay labor, for permitting fees, all the engineering stamps, things of that nature. It's going to cost them about $15,000. And their profit is going to be, or what they're going to make on that system is about $18,600, which means there's only about $3,000 in profit for them, which is, you think, a lot. But when you start thinking about all the overhead that solar companies have, big warehouses, a lot of people, it's really not a lot of money. And that what that means, though, is that you have a loan for $25,200, but the installer was only paid $18,648 for your system to be installed. So you're paying an additional $6,500 in dealer fees and are on the hook for that $25,000. But the installer only had $18,648 with which to work and to install and to buy your equipment and do all the things it needs to do to get your system up and running. So that's kind of where you're at as far as dealer fees and costs, and that's why there's not a lot of room to negotiate pricing when there's a dealer fee involved or when there's an outside finance source. There's still room to negotiate, and you can still get it down. It's just there's not as much room to negotiate. Now, why do they charge such a big dealer fee? Well, I'm not an insider. I don't know for sure. I've had it explained to me a couple different ways. But here's the best explanation. And I'm going to put the numbers up here just because it's kind of hard for me to remember them and do them in my head while I'm talking on this video. But let's say, for example, that they lend $25,000 to 3 different people. That's what, $75,000. But they're only paying at $18,600. So, that's a little over $50,000 in payment to the install companies. So right away, they have a long-term revenue stream of, in this case, a little over $75,000, but they paid out probably $50,000 or even less than that, $50,000 or so to the install companies. And then what they're going to do is they're going to turn around and they're going to try to get you to refinance your house, to get a home equity loan, do something that allows you to pay off that $25,000 loan quicker. Because if you do that, then they recoup that $6,000 profit, in essence, from you. Because remember, they lent you $25,000, but they only paid $18,000 to the installation company. So they're going to try to do everything they can. They have salespeople that do really hard sales. They're going to try to get you within the next year, after you signed your system and got it up and running, they're going to try to get you to refinance your home and roll your solar panels into your refinance and pay them off. The other thing they might be doing is taking that money and borrowing against it. But more than likely, really what they're trying to do is figure out a way to get you to either get a home equity loan or refinance it and pay them off. Because if they can get 2 out of every 3 homeowners to pay off early, then they're basically going to recoup a majority of the money they lent to the 3 homeowners, and yet still have one homeowner still out there paying off $25,000 over 20 years. And so basically what they're doing is they're recouping their money a lot quicker because they have such an exorbitant dealer fee. If they get the systems paid off quicker, that money comes back to them. And like I said, if they had 2 people out of every 3 in this scenario paying back that $25,000 loan, they would be recouping $12,000 within a year and not having to wait long term to recover that money. So they begin the entire amount of the loan, but for them, that difference between that $18,000 that they paid out to the solar company and the $25,000 they lent you, they're going to recover that $6,500. So if they get 2 people to pay it off, that's $12,000 in profit they just made right there. And then they can take that $12,000, add some more money to it, and lend it again. And it becomes a cycle where they're lending money, but they're also trying to recoup 2 or 3 out of every 4 or 5 homeowners, and are able to build a portfolio of long-range debt to them, a long-range income coming in, but very little risk because they've recouped most of that money from the homeowners that actually refinance their homes. So this is kind of the evil of solar finance, but it's also necessary, and I don't know that there's any way to get around it. But if you can get a home equity loan, if you can finance the house, the panels yourself, you're in a lot better position, because instead of paying $25,000 for that system, you might be able to negotiate it down to $19,000 or $18,000. Then you're going to see your return on your investment recovered a lot quicker, and you're not going to be on the hook for a 26% dealer fee. So hopefully I've answered some questions on the things you can do to prepare yourself when negotiating with a solar installation company or a company that sells solar. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Make comments in the comment section, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. Thank you. Have a good day.